the space between duty and desire. "May I hold you?" the Apache murmured, his voice barely more than breath, as if the wind itself might carry the question away before she could answer. Elena Whitmore did not respond. Not yet. The space between them felt heavier than words, thick with everything they had done and everything they should not have. But that moment had not come easily. It had begun, as such things often do, in silence. Weeks earlier, Elena stood at the edge of the encampment, her gloved hands clasped too tightly in front of her. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dry earth, stretching and distorting everything into something unfamiliar. It reminded her of her own life, recognizable in shape but hollow in meaning. Captain Henry Whitmore, her husband, was a man of order. His world was built on discipline, routine, and obedience. Their marriage reflected the same rigid structure. He provided security, stability, and a name that commanded respect. But affection, true, unguarded affection, had never found a place between them. Their conversations were brief, practical, and often incomplete. He spoke to her as one might speak to a duty already fulfilled, and Elena had learned, quietly, to expect nothing more. That afternoon, she had wandered farther than usual, drawn not by curiosity, but by a restless unease she could not name. The soldiers remained near the main tents, their voices sharp and controlled. Beyond them, the land softened into something quieter, less defined. That was where she saw him. Tala Grayhawk stood beside a weathered tree, his posture still yet alert, as though he were part of the land itself. His presence was not imposing, yet it demanded attention. There was a steadiness in him, a kind of quiet certainty, that Elena found herself unable to look away from. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then his gaze met hers. It was not hostile, nor was it welcoming. It simply was direct, unflinching, and deeply aware. Elena should have turned back. She knew that much. Every rule that governed her life insisted upon it. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm, carrying neither accusation nor concern. "I could say the same to you," she replied, surprised by her own steadiness. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, passed through his expression, though it vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. "This land was not drawn with your lines," he said. "It does not belong to your soldiers." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. Elena felt it settle somewhere deep within her, unsettling and strangely compelling. "I didn't come here to argue over land," she said. "Then why did you come?" The question lingered. Elena opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came. The truth was inconvenient, even to herself. She had not come with purpose. She had come because staying where she was felt unbearable. "I needed air," she said finally. Tala studied her, not with suspicion, but with a quiet attentiveness that made her feel seen in a way she had not expected. "You have plenty of that," he replied, gesturing faintly to the open land. "Not where I come from." This time, the silence that followed was different. It was not empty. It was shared. Days passed before she saw him again. And yet, she found herself returning to that same place, as though drawn by something she could neither justify nor resist. Their meetings were brief at first. A few exchanged words. A glance held a moment too long. Nothing that could be named, nothing that could be condemned. But something had begun. Tala spoke little of himself, and Elena did not press. What mattered was not what was said, but what existed in the quiet between their words. There was no expectation, no obligation, only presence. It was unfamiliar. It was dangerous. And it was, she realized, the first time in years she had felt anything at all. At home, Henry remained unchanged. His attention was fixed on reports, strategies, and the constant movement of authority. If he noticed the subtle shift in Elena, he gave no indication. But Elena noticed everything. The way silence with Tala felt different from silence with her husband. The way her thoughts lingered on moments that should have meant nothing. The way her pulse quickened at the mere possibility of seeing him again. She told herself it would end. It had to. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fading gold, she found him waiting. "You came back," he said. "I told myself I wouldn't," she admitted. "And yet you are here." "Yes." There was no denial left in her voice. Tala stepped closer, though still leaving space between them, a space that now felt deliberate. "This path," he said quietly, "it does not lead where you think." "I'm not thinking," Elena replied. "That's the problem." For the first time, something in his expression shifted, something softer, more uncertain. "Then you should," he said. "Do you?" He did not answer immediately. "No," he said at last. The honesty of it settled between them, undeniable. Elena exhaled slowly, her composure slipping just enough to reveal the truth she had been avoiding. "This shouldn't be happening." "No," Tala agreed. But neither of them moved. Neither of them left. And in that stillness, in that fragile, unspoken understanding, the line between what was and what should never be began to disappear. Far in the distance, a voice called Elena's name. She stepped back, the moment breaking but not dissolving. "I have to go," she said. Tala nodded, though his gaze did not waver. "Yes," he said. "You do." Elena turned, her steps measured, her posture controlled. But with each step away, she felt the quiet certainty settle deeper within her. This was not over. It had only just begun. What should not be named? Elena did not intend to return. She told herself that as she sat across from Captain Henry Whitmore, her posture composed, her hands folded neatly in her lap. He spoke of patrol routes and supply delays, his tone even, his attention fixed somewhere beyond her. It was the same voice he used with his men, measured, efficient, untouched by emotion. She nodded when required. She answered when addressed. But her thoughts were elsewhere. They lingered in the quiet stretch of land beyond the encampment, where words had been few, yet somehow more meaningful than anything spoken within these walls. She replayed Tala's voice in her mind, not for what he said, but for how he said it, without expectation, without distance, without restraint. "Elena." Henry's voice pulled her back. "Yes." "You're not listening." "I am," she replied, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. His gaze lingered on her a moment longer than usual, as if searching for something unfamiliar. Then just as quickly it passed. "See that you are," he said, returning to his papers. The dismissal was subtle, but unmistakable. Elena lowered her eyes, the familiar weight settling over her chest. This was her life, structured, predictable, and devoid of the very thing she had begun to crave. Connection. That evening, she did not go. She remained inside, forcing herself into stillness, into obedience. The hours passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. She told herself it was for the best. That distance would restore clarity. That whatever had begun would fade if left unattended. But clarity did not come. Only restlessness. By the following day, the silence had become unbearable. She found herself walking the same path without fully deciding to do so, her steps guided by something stronger than reason. The land felt different now, not foreign, but familiar in a way that unsettled her. And he was there. Tala stood where he had before, as though he had known she would return. "You came back," he said, his tone neither surprised nor accusatory. "I shouldn't have," Elena replied, though she did not stop walking toward him. "No," he agreed. The simplicity of his response disarmed her. "Then why does it feel like I had no choice?" she asked. Tala studied her, his gaze steady, searching. "Because you are not used to choosing for yourself," he said. The words struck deeper than she expected. "I make my own choices," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "Do you?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated. In that moment, she saw it clearly. The structure of her life, the expectations placed upon her, the silent agreements she had accepted without question. She had followed the path laid before her, never once asking if it was the one she wanted. Until now. "This isn't right," she said, though the words felt weaker each time she spoke them. "No," Tala said again. "It isn't." "Then why don't we stop?" He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing just enough to shift the air around them. "Because you don't want to?" he said. Elena's breath caught. "And you?" she asked. Tala did not look away. No, he admitted. The honesty of it stripped away the last of her defenses. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was no longer uncertain. It was charged, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Elena became acutely aware of every detail. The warmth of the fading sun, the faint rustle of wind through the dry grass, the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, and the distance between them. It was small now, too small. You should go, Tala said, though he made no move to step back. Yes, Elena whispered, but she didn't. Instead, she remained where she was, caught between the life she had known and the one she had not dared to imagine. Tala, his name felt unfamiliar on her lips, yet undeniably right. He watched her carefully, as though waiting for something, permission, perhaps, or restraint. She gave him neither. The moment shifted. Slowly, almost cautiously, Tala reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture, nothing more than fingers brushing against hers. But it changed everything. Elena felt it instantly, a quiet, undeniable spark that traveled far beyond the point of contact. It was not sudden or overwhelming. It was steady, grounding, and deeply real. She should have pulled away. She knew that, but she didn't. Instead, her fingers closed around his. The world seemed still. There were no voices, no expectations, no obligations pressing in on her. Only this brief, fragile connection that felt more honest than anything she had known in years. This is where it begins, Tala said softly. Elena met his gaze. And where does it end? His expression shifted, something unreadable passing through it. It doesn't end well. The truth of it lingered between them. Elena felt it, understood it, and yet she did not let go. I don't care, she said, the words leaving her before she could stop them. Tala's grip tightened slightly, not in possession, but in acknowledgement. You will, he said. Maybe, she replied, but not today. For the first time, something close to a smile touched his lips, brief, restrained, but undeniably there. Not today, he echoed. The choice had been made. Not spoken, not declared, but understood. What had once been uncertain was now undeniable. The line they had approached so carefully had been crossed, not with a single step, but with a quiet surrender. Elena knew what it meant. She knew what it would cost. And still she stayed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the land into shadow, she felt the weight of that decision settle within her, not as regret, but as something far more dangerous. Certainty, somewhere behind her, beyond the reach of fading light. Her life remained exactly as it had always been. But here, in this moment, it had already begun to unravel, and there would be no turning back. When silence breaks, the first sign was not a word. It was a pause. Captain Henry Whitmore was not a man given to hesitation. His thoughts moved with precision, his actions followed without delay, and his observations, though often unspoken, were rarely mistaken. So he stopped mid-sentence, his attention fixed not on the report before him, but on Elena. The shift was subtle, yet unmistakable. You've been walking farther than usual, he said. The statement was calm, measured, but it carried a weight that pressed against the room. Elena did not look up immediately. She kept her gaze lowered, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the table as though the motion itself might steady her. The air is clearer beyond the tents, she replied. Henry watched her, his expression unchanged. There's plenty of air here. Yes, she said softly, but not space. The words lingered longer than she intended. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Henry leaned back slightly, studying her in a way he had not before, not as an obligation, but as something requiring attention. Is there something you wish to say? He asked. Elena met his gaze then, her composure intact but fragile beneath the surface. No, the lie came easily, too easily. Henry held her gaze a moment longer before nodding once, as though filing the moment away rather than confronting it. Very well, he said, returning to his papers. But the pause had already done its work. The land felt different that evening. Not quieter, not louder, but watchful. Elena sensed at the moment she stepped beyond the edge of the encampment. The wind carried a sharper edge, the fading light casting longer, more uncertain shadows. And still she went. Tala was there, as he had been each time before, but something in his posture had changed. The stillness she had come to recognize was no longer calm. It was alert. "You were seen," he said before she could speak. Elena's breath caught. "By whom?" "That is not the question," he replied. "The question is what they saw." A flicker of unease moved through her. "There was nothing to see," she said, though the words lacked conviction. Tala stepped closer, his gaze steady, searching. "You believe that?" Elena hesitated. What had once felt hidden now seemed dangerously visible. Every glance, every moment of closeness, had it truly gone unnoticed? Or had she simply convinced herself it had? Henry asked questions, she admitted. Tala's expression darkened, not with fear, but with understanding. "Then it has begun." The words settled heavily between them. Elena felt the fragile certainty she had clung to begin to fracture. "We can stop," she said quickly. "We can end this before." "No," Tala said, his voice firm but not unkind. She stared at him. "No," she repeated. "If it could have ended, it already would have," he said. "You would not be here." The truth of it cut deeper than she expected. Elena turned away slightly, her thoughts unraveling faster than she could contain them. "This was never meant to happen," she said. "And yet it did. That doesn't make it right." "No," Tala agreed. "It doesn't." The silence that followed was heavier than any before it. For the first time, the weight of what they had done pressed fully against them, not as something distant or abstract, but as something real, immediate, and unavoidable. Elena felt it in the tightening of her chest, in the way her thoughts refused to settle. "We're going to hurt him," she said quietly. Tala did not respond at once. "Yes," he said finally. The certainty in his voice left no room for denial. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the reality of it settling over her like a shadow she could not escape. "And you?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "What will this cost you?" Tala's gaze shifted, not away from her, but inward, as though measuring something unseen. "More than it should," he said. The answer was enough. For a moment, it seemed as though the weight of consequence might finally pull them apart. Elena took a step back, then another. "This has to end," she said, though the words felt as fragile as the space between them. Tala watched her, his expression unreadable. "If you walk away now," he said, "you must not return." The finality of it struck her harder than she expected. No more stolen moments. No more quiet understanding. No more escape from the life she had come to resent. Only absence. Elena felt the choice before her, clear, undeniable, and impossibly difficult. She could leave. She could restore what had been broken, bury what had begun, and return to the certainty of her life with Henry. Or she could stay and accept everything that would follow. Her breath came slowly, unevenly. "I don't know how to go back," she admitted. Tala's gaze softened, though the tension in his stance remained. "Then you already know your answer." Elena looked at him, truly looked this time, not as a moment of escape, but as a man who stood at the center of a choice she could no longer avoid. Behind her lay duty. Before her stood desire. And, somewhere between the two, consequence. "I'm afraid," she said. "You should be," Tala replied. The honesty of it did not push her away. It anchored her. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward again, closing the distance she had just tried to create. Tala did not move to meet her. He did not need to. The decision had already been made. Elena reached for him, her hand trembling only slightly as it found his. This time, the connection did not feel like a beginning. It felt like a commitment, not to each other alone, but to everything that would come with it. Far in the distance, a voice carried faintly through the air. Her name, sharp and unmistakable. "Henry." Elena froze. The sound cut through the moment with a clarity that left no room for illusion. They had been seen. Or worse, they had been expected. Tala's grip tightened, his expression sharpening as he turned toward the direction of the voice. "It's too late," he said quietly. Elena's heart pounded, the truth of it echoing louder than the call itself. The silence that had once protected them was gone, and in its place stood something far more dangerous. Exposure. Elena did not let go. Even as the distance between her two worlds collapsed, even as the consequences she had tried to ignore rose to meet her, she remained exactly where she was. Caught, not between two men, but between the life she had lived, and the truth she could no longer deny. And this time, there would be no silence left to hide in. The cost of holding on. The silence did not return. It shattered. Henry Whitmore's presence cut through the fading light long before he reached them. His steps were measured, controlled, but there was nothing calm in the way he moved. Each stride carried intention, and something beneath it, something tightly restrained. Elena felt it before she saw him. "Tala," she whispered, her fingers still entwined with his. He did not pull away. "Not yet. Let him see," Tala said quietly. The words were not reckless. They were resolute. Elena's breath faltered. Every instinct urged her to step back, to reclaim the distance that might soften what was about to happen. But distance no longer meant safety. It only meant denial. And denial had already failed. Henry stopped a few paces from them. For a moment, no one spoke. His gaze moved first to Elena, then to her hand in Tala's, and finally back to her face. There was no confusion there, no uncertainty, only recognition. "So," he said, his voice low, stripped of its usual formality. "This is where you've been going." Elena tried to speak, but the words refused to form. There was nothing she could say that would undo what stood plainly before him. Henry's attention shifted to Tala. "And you," he continued, his tone sharpening. "You understand exactly what you're doing." Tala met his gaze without hesitation. "Yes." The single word landed with quiet force. Henry let out a slow breath, his composure tightening rather than breaking. "Then you understand the consequences as well." "I do." Elena felt the tension rise, thick and suffocating. This was no longer about hidden glances or stolen moments. It was real now, fully exposed, impossible to retreat from. "Henry," she began, her voice unsteady. "Don't," he said, cutting her off without raising his voice. The restraint in that single word hurt more than anger would have. "Do not speak as though this is something that requires explanation," he continued. "There is nothing unclear about what I see." Elena's chest tightened. "You never saw me," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. The moment they left her lips, she knew there was no taking them back. Henry's expression shifted, not with rage, but with something colder. "I saw exactly what was required of me," he replied. "And nothing more," she said. The truth hung between them, stark and unforgiving. For the first time, something in Henry's composure cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to reveal the fracture beneath. "And this," he said, gesturing slightly toward Tala, "is what you believe you were missing?" Elena did not answer immediately, because the answer mattered. "Yes," she said finally. The words settled with finality. Henry nodded once, slowly, as though confirming something he had already begun to understand. "I see," he said. The quiet acceptance in his voice was more unsettling than anger. Tala stepped forward then, placing himself slightly between them, not as a challenge, but as a presence that could not be ignored. "This is not her burden alone," he said. Henry's gaze snapped to him. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The air shifted. Elena felt it instantly, the subtle but unmistakable movement towards something irreversible. "Tala," she said, a quiet warning in her voice. But he did not step back. "You will not take this out on her," Tala continued, his tone steady. Henry let out a short breath, almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You presume much," he said. "I see enough," Tala replied. The tension between them sharpened, but it did not erupt. Not yet, because this was not a moment of violence. It was a moment of reckoning. Henry turned back to Elena. "You've made your choice," he said. It was not a question. Elena felt the weight of it settle over her, heavier than anything that had come before. Had she? The answer should have been simple. But standing there, with both men before her, she felt the truth more clearly than ever. Not as desire, not as escape, but as consequence. "I chose to feel something real," she said. Henry's gaze hardened. And what you feel now? He asked. Elena hesitated, because what she felt now was not simple. It was not just love. It was fear, loss, and the undeniable understanding that something, no matter what she chose next, would be broken beyond repair. She looked at Tala, then at Henry. I don't know, she admitted. The honesty of it changed everything. Tala's expression shifted, something quieter settling in his gaze. Henry, however, grew still. That, he said slowly, is the only honest thing you've said. The words carried no cruelty, only truth. And truth, Elena realized, was far less forgiving than deception. The wind moved through the space between them, carrying with it the last warmth of the day. Something was ending. She could feel it. Not just the secrecy, not just the illusion, but the fragile belief that she could have both duty and desire, safety and freedom. That belief had brought her here, and now it demanded its cost. Tala released her hand. The absence of his touch was immediate, undeniable. Elena felt it like a sudden drop, as though something solid beneath her had given way. She looked at him, her breath catching. Tala, his gaze held hers, steady but distant in a way it had never been before. This was never meant to last, he said. The words echoed something he had told her before, but now they carried finality. You said it yourself, he continued. You don't know. Elena felt the truth of that cut deeper than anything Henry had said. Then stay, she said, though the plea lacked certainty. Tala shook his head slightly. No, he said. The simplicity of it left no room for argument. This is where it ends. The moment circled back to where it had begun. A question unspoken, a choice unavoidable. Elena felt the weight of it settle fully at last. Not as confusion, but as understanding. She turned to him, her voice barely more than a whisper. May I hold you?